So this conversation can be about anything. I wanted to start off just by kind of thanking you for your videos over the years. I started watching you, I think, back in 2008 or 2009 when I was kind of learning the realities of the Federal Reserve and the monetary system and things like that. So I do want to thank you. I think your videos are very educating. And actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about Bitcoin, but we can talk about whatever else. And actually, you are the first person I heard of Bitcoin from. So thanks for that also.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Somebody actually messaged me. One of my viewers messaged me about Bitcoins and asked me, what do you think about Bitcoins? And like in March, and I never heard of it. March of, what was it, 2011, I think it was? Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is this? And when I took a look at it and I read the paper, the Satoshi paper, I said, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been looking for in the evolution of currency. Because the problem, one of the things I learned was reading about how our monetary system works. It works in theory, right?
Yeah.
If you just read it and just go, okay, yeah, that should work, right?
Well, even in theory, there are some things that are very fundamentally wrong with it, but but I think that definitely on paper, no pun intended, it does look better than it actually is in practice. And it's been about 100 years now almost, and we've kind of seen the consequences of that.
But look, what was the cause of the consequences of that currency, of our currency being inflated? It's because we can constantly go more and more in debt to increase the currency supply. So if there's ever a problem, we don't have to go and mine some more gold, right? We just have to just print some more, go into more debt, and then we get away with it because it's just okay. We're just signing on the dotted line, and boom, away you go. More paper money in the system, and governments use that to create more money for whatever project they want, whether it's going to the moon or going to war. They just create more money. That's it. And that is the fundamental problem, is that there's an unlimited abuse of the system. So there's no paying back the debt. What John Maynard Keynes said that the government should do is like, okay, when there's a bad time, go into debt. When there's a good time, pay it off. But they don't do that. Right?
Yeah, of course not. And then when those programs that they printed money to fund, when those programs start to fail, like you see with the public education system, like you see with, like you said, NASA, we went to the moon, and now we haven't really done much since then, and we certainly haven't gone to the moon since. But even when those programs start to fail pretty miserably, there's still a lot of paper money just backing it up. And so that's kind of another consequence of this paper money fiat system, is that you have, no matter what, you always can fund, the next failed government program, unfortunately.
That's true. I know. The war on poverty. The United States has started a war on poverty, and poverty won.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very tragic, and I get very frustrated sometimes just kind of thinking of what the world could be if we had just a sound money, if nothing else changed. Just a sound money. Of course, I would like to see a lot of the other stuff changed, because even with a balanced budget, you can still have governments go to war. You can still have governments create roads and public school systems on a much smaller scale. But at the same time, it just it really eats away at me sometimes about kind of the potential that we're all just kind of gliding past because of government intervention, basically.
Basically, because the intervention is part of the power of that intervention is the fiat money system, because they can steal without them knowing, and by going into debt and creating the money. And that is the real power of this current monetary system, is being able to steal money without people knowing it, and giving them treats and saying, hey, this is going to be better. We're going to do this with this money, and make life better. Because everybody thinks, right, if you're rich, life's going to be better. So you can just throw money at anything, and it will just work out fine. But as you know,
Yeah, you can max out your credit card and it works great for a couple weeks or even a couple years, and then you start to wondering how you're going to pay the bill. The only difference between us maxing out our credit cards and the U.S. government maxing out their credit cards is the people who max out the credit cards don't actually have any consequences of their actions that come upon them personally. If you and I build up credit card debt and then we fail to pay it off, well, there's going to be collectors knocking on our door, and eventually there could be some legal action filed against you. But it's really not the case with the people who pass the laws in government and create and spend all this money. They're really not personally liable, which is, I think, one of the reasons that they just spend with licentiousness. But
yeah, well, they and then they make promises that they know that can't be kept in the future, right? So, for example, they give the government employees lavish pensions in the future, right? Instead of raises for today, because they know, well, I won't be elected later on, or who cares? It'll be somebody else's problem.
Exactly.
And this is where the United States is right now. We're coming to the end of that road here, where people wanted their pensions that they were promised, and the money's not there.
Yeah, and we are at our debt limit. We're at our $16 trillion debt limit, the United States is. And I think that that the public sector is starting to feel a lot of pressure that the politicians are putting on them. And I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. It's going to get much worse. And this is what happens when the government sets itself up as a provider, basically a monopoly provider of essential services. I mean, the government has a monopoly on defense, schools, policing, justice, monetary system, food and drug inspection, roads, flights, mail, and soon in the United States it's going to be healthcare. And I know you guys in Canada have that already. Yeah, well, when it sets itself up as this monopoly, then it's just gonna fall so hard, because there's not really any private sector infrastructure that's kind of ready immediately to replace it.
Yes, that's true. And you know what, you hit on one point a little while back. You're saying that, if one thing can change is that if we had a sound monetary system, all the rest of the stuff can still exist. It's just that it probably on a smaller scale. Yep. And you know what, we'd be better for it, right? Probably have better technology. We'd be a lot further along. Right, we'd have actual real electric cars by now, right? Because I say to my brother all the time, isn't it amazing that the computers have advanced so much in the last 30 years, but the car is generally the same?
Yeah.
It's got...
in fact, I think cars back in the early 80s, and this is, from anecdotal, I was born in 1983, but cars back in the early 80s, I've heard, had much better gas mileage, just because there were fewer regulations on, the tensile strength of steel and the weight that a car had to be, and crash tests and things like that. So cars back in the early 80s, like on average, actually had better miles per gallon than they do today, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, the reason for that is because the regulation came from the car companies themselves. They've lobbied the government so they can get they can crush their own competition. Right, but it actually ended up backfiring on them, of course. As you can see, GM went bankrupt. And you know what? GM's probably going to go bankrupt again in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and then was it Chevrolet that just stopped producing the Volt because they were losing upwards of $40,000 per vehicle or something like that? After you factor in all the subsidies and everything.
$1,000 each car they lose.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
Because it's the government, right? The government, they can't stop producing them, actually, because the government wants them, and the government owns GM, so that's that.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
How many Russian cars have you ever owned in your life?
Right. Exactly. I'm not going to own one anytime soon, that's for sure. And probably people elsewhere in the world are probably not going to own U.S. cars pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a matter of time, I feel like.
Definitely not the Chevy Volt, I can tell you that much.
Right. I own a Hyundai. It comes from Korea. Mm-hmm. And just because, cars manufactured in the U.S. these days, just when you read ratings online and people who have owned them and the maintenance costs and everything like that, it's just they're just inferior cars at the moment. Unfortunately, I would like to say otherwise, but
true.
Yeah.
But you got the one car company that in the States. Have you heard of Tesla?
Yes, I have heard of Tesla. I actually went. I was in Palo Alto in California a couple months ago. There was a Tesla. One of the new. It was about 2 months before they had officially released or rolled them out. But I got to sit in one and play around with the controls and everything like that. And they had a frame where they had you could see they had all these each individual batteries, a couple hundred batteries or something like that, powering the vehicle. And I got to talk with a guy about it. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, I don't know where that's headed. Honestly, what do you think about that?
Well, I think Tesla. She's managed to produce cars in the most business unfriendly state in the United States, and I don't know how he managed to do it, but kudos to that guy who built that company. To build a car company in the United States with all your regulations and all your rules that a car has to have, that is a monumental feat. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it is, but I think it's probably a little bit easier for an electric car company. I think if you were a startup car company that wanted to do, pure gasoline, gas guzzler vehicles, it might be a lot more difficult. But I mean, I don't know Tesla's situation. I don't know how easy or how difficult it was for them to get in business. But I think politicians are in a place right now where it's very popular to be green and environmentally friendly, and so I kind of wonder, how much easier it made Tesla to start up, based on the fact that they were, advertising themselves as a green company, and it's kind of politically expedient for people in power to,
I'm sure that helped a lot
to do that. Yeah. But yeah, just back, I was just thinking when you were talking about how if we had a sound money system, the government could exist, but it would be a lot smaller. Like, what I was thinking of then is just look at the wars in the 1800s, the size of those wars and the death toll, the casualties in those wars, regardless of what it was fought over, it was a lot smaller than the death tolls and the casualties and the economic price of wars post-Federal Reserve.
Yes.
In World War I, World War II, we never really had the ability to spend all that money. The Federal Reserve allowed the United States to, create aircraft carriers, and nowadays, drone strikes and Apache helicopters and underground bases and whatever else they have secret.
That's true. It's just that we have better weapons now, so that's part of the reason why death toll is a little higher now.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
20th century. So, but anyways, getting on to bitcoins.
Yeah.
I find it interesting how people hate bitcoins with passion, or they like it with a passion. I don't know of anybody who's indifferent to bitcoins.
Yeah, no, it's true. I do absolutely see that. I think that time is really going to sway a lot of people's opinions on this, but I think that it's easy to look at Bitcoin if you come from a libertarian perspective of wanting there to be more to your money than just paper, and wanting to have gold and silver backing to your currency. I think from that libertarian perspective, which I think you and I are probably more exposed to, watching libertarian videos and interacting with people here on YouTube and the internet, because that's just our choice. I'm sure if you were standard Democrat or Republican, it might be a little bit different. But I can kind of understand people's skepticism towards Bitcoin from that point of view. But I think that once you learn a little bit more about it, and once you learn kind of the nature of money, then you kind of start to see that it doesn't really matter if if money rather is backed by gold and silver. What matters is that people are trading into it voluntarily, and they understand the nature of the currency. They understand that there's a set amount of bitcoins mined. They understand that there's a cap on the total amount of bitcoins that can be mined, and that sort of thing.
That's part of it. It's just that the thing is, for me, is that we need a currency, right? And because the reason why we need a currency is for convenience and ease of use of transferring wealth around the world, because we're a global society nowadays, right? And you don't have to have a manufacturing shop right in your neighborhood. You could have it anywhere in the world, and to be able to transfer wealth around the world is a key part of growing our economy now and going forward in our 22nd century. So I feel that this Bitcoin, if it takes off, it actually works and takes off. I think it will actually take us to the stars, because money is a quarter is like the wheels, the gearbox of the economy. And if you destroy that, you destroy the whole economy, and you destroy the production of smart and intelligent people. And also, when we produce something, whenever we make something, somebody produces the bitcoins, but then somebody else does the exchange, and somebody else does other parts of it. Somebody does the mining pools. We build from previous things that other people have built, and if people are getting robbed, they're not going to build anything. They're not going to build that next little piece that somebody else could use, that could build the next bigger piece that somebody else can use to take us to the stars or whatever, right? So I see that if people embrace bitcoins and it goes further on, that we will have a new renaissance. Personally, that's my guess, right? Could be wrong, but I feel so excited about it. That's what I see coming down the pipe, because I didn't see that with gold and silver. I thought, yeah, you know what, we'll probably go back to a gold standard, and then the governments will do the same thing all over again, right?
Of course.
Right, and it won't. It was the same. It will just fall in the same trap. And but if we can go to a hard money where they can't cheat the system, then we will advance higher, right? And because there are people who save their money. Peter Schiff always says that savings, right, is used to produce more, is your capital, and it produces more wealth, because when you go and invest it in productive enterprises, right, that somebody has come up with a great idea, and you believe that they can make money from it, not only just make money but also produce something that people could use and want. You help grow the economy, because you've already produced something, right? In order to get your capital, right, you had to produce something of value, and you save that capital, and you might want to just save it for your retirement, and that's fine. That's also fine too, because when you're spending into the economy, you're buying things that you need to survive, and so obviously you're gonna buy things to help like make things efficient and maybe even reduce your costs. So somebody's going to produce something to reduce your costs. So they've produced something more efficient to sell to you, because you've saved the money, and you've saved the Bitcoin. Let's say it's Bitcoins, right? You've saved the Bitcoins. They've appreciated a little bit more, and they want to have those Bitcoins as well. So they produce something that helps you, spend wisely. So you go and buy that asset, or whatever it is, might be food or whatever they produce. So if the problem is with our current currency is that it depreciates, and then when and what it tends to do is it gives people the feeling that they have to go and spend it right away.
Yeah, there's definitely a war on savings. I mean, the interest rates are so low that it's people. My dad had a long conversation with me about how if you ever want to borrow money from anybody, now's the time to do it. And I'm kind of holding back. I mean, my wife and I are just renting. We haven't bought anything. We haven't bought a house or anything like that. But there is definitely a war on savings for sure.
I mean, yeah, sure. If you want to, if you have the assets to buy a house, and you wanted to live there, you have the assets to buy a house cash, and you wanted to live there. But you have to understand that a house is a consumer item, not an investment. If you understand that concept, Sure, go ahead and buy a house if you want. If that's what you want, that's the key. Is that what you want? Right? It's always because I noticed that you know what I if I had learned this stuff before, I never really wanted a house.
Yeah.
I only did it because everybody else wanted one, and it was the in thing to do. And the houses only went up, so I figured, well, you know what, it's a way of saving and this and that, and you know, I felt the inflation, and I felt, well, you know, my money's I can't save it in stocks and stuff like that because that's gambling, and might as well throw it in the house, blah blah blah. And you know, I fell for the whole trap. I mean, I didn't see it because I didn't understand how money worked, and it was only because Ron Paul, when he said that our monetary system is unfair, transfers wealth from the poor and the middle class to the rich, I was like, oh damn, that was like I realized that I didn't understand money, and at first I thought that Ron Paul was just another scumbag politician. There's no way this could be true. So until I researched him, and once I realized that he wasn't a scumbag politician, I realized his words were honest and true.
And he's been talking about the Federal Reserve since the late 1970s, early 1980s.
Yes, yes, and I just wish had met him sooner. I mean, I always kick myself thinking, oh man, if I knew about silver and gold back in the '90s, I would have been loading up.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to save back then, but I was like, I knew that it was like seemed futile
Right.
because you know everything was always going up, and the only way to save was in mutual funds, and there was like, oh well, there's no guarantee that you're gonna make more money here, right? It's like, well, these are terrible choices here, right? I can go into bonds and get wiped out inflation, or I can just save cash and get wiped out inflation, or go stocks and get wiped out.
Yeah, the whole thing is rigged, and I think one of the things I remember you saying maybe last year, a couple of years ago, that people that are in the stock market and doing day trading and things like that, they're picking up pennies off of the railroad tracks, and you better be if you're doing that. You better be prepared to get off when you hear the whistle coming around the corner. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? I noticed that a lot of traders like to day traders like to say, "Oh, I've made like 90% of my money in a year, or 100%." I'm like, I try to point out that you know. You don't separate your capital your capital that you use to trade with stocks and the capital that you use for savings. They're not separate, right? And that's part of your problem, because what happens is my capital, right? If I were to count my capital, is not just my savings, but it's also my ability to produce more wealth. Their capital is their savings and their ability to trade, but it's all most of their capital that their tools, like for example my tool is the computer, which is also part of my capital, right? They they only count like all that cash, and then they have to make, you know, they have to like pay bills. The main thing that traders forget is their expenses. They're just their everyday expenses. They exclude that from their from part of they're taking away from their earnings. So let's just say you make 100% a year from day trading. Well, not really, because now you had to pay taxes. You had to you know, eat. You had to pay for your car. You had to pay for your house. You had to pay for your electricity bill. You had to pay for your trading account.
Yeah.
They don't count.
and not only that, you have to put that money into a high risk situation every day. You know what I mean? So the capital that you accumulate, like you said, you have to pay bills, pay taxes, but also you have to risk that money in order to, you know, continue on with what you're doing. And, you know, maybe you up 100% one year, maybe you're down 100% another year.
But there's a way to do it that's safe. That even though, like the train, where even if the train comes, it's like whatever. Because one way I pointed out to doing it is like, one is you go buy physical assets, You borrow against that physical asset, and you trade with that, because you're creating money from your physical asset, and you're trading with that. So even if the money goes to zero, who cares? Because you've got the physical assets as a backup, and the loan payments, the interest payments on the loan is just part of your expenses of operating. That's all.
Right.
Because it's your insurance. You could even call it an insurance policy against the currency going to zero. Whatever you want to look, however you want to look at it.
Right.
So that's how I do it, day trading, if I did it, because there's no way I'd be using my own capital.
Yeah, I kind of stay away from that. But
Yeah.
well, let's go back into Bitcoin a little bit, if you don't mind. You are a Bitcoin miner.
Yes.
So can you? Because I don't mine myself. I don't really feel like I would have the technical knowledge to know how to set up a computer network and processors and things like that to do it. Kind of tell me a little bit about mining for people who don't really know a lot about it, Bitcoin mining, and tell us how it secures the Bitcoin network. How basically the incentives that are given to you for mining are going towards ultimate security for everybody who uses the Bitcoin system, whether or not they're mining.
Yeah, sure. Bitcoins have this thing called the blockchain. The blockchain, it consists of all the transactions that has ever occurred in the Bitcoin history. Each block contains a group of transactions, and it is a calculation of the previous block and all other blocks. So what you have to do is as a miner, you have to find the next block, including all the transactions that has come by your computer, basically, because transactions get broadcast to the network. You have to verify that transaction is correct, and you have to include that transaction into your block. You don't have to. I mean, you could actually reprogram your Bitcoin mining client to say, okay, well, only if the transaction is over a certain amount will I accept it, and I'm not going to accept any free transactions. You can actually do that,
Right.
but nobody generally does. But you have the option to do that, and
On the user end, they have the option. Like if I was sending Bitcoin to somebody else, then I have the option to set it up that I don't have to pay any kind of transaction fee. But in order for that transaction to confirm on the Bitcoin network, it might take a little bit longer than if I donated, say, 0.01 or 0.001 Bitcoins, and that donation goes towards the miners.
And the reason why it might take a little bit longer is because some miners might have it reprogram their client, their software, so that they reject any free transactions.
So basically, if I'm not incorrect, there's less hashing power available to confirm your transaction. Is that right?
Yes, in effect, right? Because, like, for example, I don't do that, but some miners might say, okay, well, you know what? I want to maximize my the fees, right? And I want to get the transaction fees. So any transactions that come through that have no fees on them, I'm not going to add them in the blockchain, and vice versa. Some what's it called? Bitcoin miners, they will accept all free transactions. So for even if the Bitcoin client requires you to pay, right? Because internally the code figures out that, hey, you know what, you should pay something. You can reprogram your Bitcoin client to say, no, I'm going to send it out there, and hopefully somebody's going to pick it up. There are some Bitcoin miners out there that will pick that up, the absolutely free ones, even though you should be paying. So that's part of the mining operation. I mean, you can. I don't suggest anybody, but you can actually find clients, Bitcoin clients, where you don't have to pay any fees, but I wouldn't suggest it because you might be waiting a long time.
Right, but that's actually a pretty good option for people who are, for instance, doing like a monthly payment. Like, for instance, I paid, when I was hosting a website for my swimming pool cleaning business, I paid somebody in England to host my website, and he actually designed my website, and I paid him every month in Bitcoins. I don't think I ever sent a transaction through, but I wasn't really in a hurry, or I don't think I paid a fee, but I wasn't really in a hurry for that transaction to be confirmed. But, I mean, obviously they all went through within 24 hours.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, they will go through eventually. It just depends on how, if you pay your fee or not. So, I like mining because I like computers basically. I'm crazy when I was able to buy a whole bunch of video cards and computers. I have 10 computers in my basement right now, all running with 4 video cards in them, hashing away. They give off tremendous amount of heat. It's so much heat
I've heard that.
if if I unplug the venting, I could heat my house so much that we get up to 28 degrees Celsius inside the house, even in the winter, dead of cold winter. So it gives off tremendous amounts of heat.
Well, you could save a little bit on your heating costs. Unfortunately, the electricity costs that used to run it are a little outrageous.
Electricity costs are I pay about $1,500 every 2 months.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah.
I've heard that in Canada. Have you heard this as well? That well, at least one person. I just read an article on it. This is over a year ago, I think. He got a visit from the Canadian version of the Drug Enforcement Agency because they were looking at his electricity records and thought that he was, had a basement full of growing lights for marijuana.
Yeah, you know what? I was talking to a few insurance companies about that, and they said, "Well, how much water do you use? Do you use a lot of water?"
Oh, right.
Don't worry about it.
I guess that's a giveaway too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they check that too.
You're not using a lot of water, are you, Da Vinci?
No.
It's okay if you are. Just wondering.
Yeah. So the new you know what Bitcoin mining is changing really rapidly actually, because the new technology, we're moving away from video cards. We're moving from video cards to FPGA boards. FPGA boards are programmable CPUs so that they're a lot cooler to run than GPUs, graphics cards. Yeah, my FPGA board, they use about I think it's like 5-10 watts or something like that. It's nothing. And plus my GPUs are like 200 watts, right? And the GPUs, they provide me with let's see here. The average GPU drive provides you with 300 mega hashes, whilst an FPGA board provides you with 800 mega hashes. So
that's more than double the efficiency of your units, basically.
Exactly. But FPGA boards are slightly more expensive. So, for example, a GPU that provides 300 mega hashes will cost you anywhere from $150 to $250. And an FPGA board will cost you like $600 to $700.
Oh, wow!
Right. So yeah, there's definite price, but the power consumption is dramatically lower. So
right, and if you're paying upwards of $700, $800 a month, then it makes sense.
Yes. Now FPGA boards are going to go by the wayside because now the ASIC boards are coming out. A company named Butterfly Labs has produced an ASIC boards. ASIC boards is basically a step above the FPGA boards. Instead of programming the CPU to do what the specific task, the ASIC boards, it has the programming already built in the CPU, so it's part of the CPU. It built into the integrated circuit.
Sorry, the Bitcoin software is built into it already?
Yes, sort of like that. It's built into it. That's the basic. It's a little more complicated than that, but basically that's what it is, and it runs a lot faster. For the price of $1,200, I've purchased an ASIC board that has 40 gigahashes of power. That is orders of magnitude greater
Right.
than the FPGA board, which is 800 mega hashes, not giga hashes. So one giga hash is 1,000 mega hashes. So 40 giga hashes is huge. I've purchased 6 ASIC boards. So with that, I'd be like the second, or what? Maybe not the second, but the fifth biggest pool with my 6.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And I think one of the arguments about against Bitcoin is that you have, so many people creating so much energy and power, and they kind of view it as kind of wasted energy for the miners to secure the network. But like what you're saying is that over time, as the GPUs get more efficient, then there's basically going to be fewer and fewer miners, and the miners that do exist will probably have, smaller but more powerful computers, right?
Yes. Here's the thing, right? What they're doing is actually they're programming the board specifically to do the Bitcoin task. When you program, when you create a CPU to do a specific. This is why our GPUs are faster. Because the GPUs, the ATI GPUs, what they do is exclusive ORs. It's a mathematical algorithm. I don't know if you've heard of exclusive OR, but anyways, it's a math algorithm, and if the CPU is designed to specifically do that operation, it's faster than like your normal CPU is not really designed to specifically do that operation fast.
Right.
But if you create a CPU that does that operation really fast, then it'll do it fast and with less power. And that's what the ASIC boards are doing. Basically, they're specifically designed. So they're specifically designed for Bitcoins. So if Bitcoin dies, my ASIC board is completely useless. FPGA, they can be reprogrammed, right? But ASIC boards, no. They're only for the Bitcoin and nothing else. So if the what's it called, the encryption changes, I'm screwed. Right, something like that changes. Oh, it's it. It's over. I wasted all that money.
Interesting.
So yeah, Bitcoins has to be successful, or else, or I have to make my money back on the purchase of these ASIC boards, which I think I have because I'm just using the Bitcoins that I already have to pay for them because I can buy them with Bitcoin. So that's what I've done. I haven't used any out-of-pocket money.
Right.
So.
We'll talk a little bit about Bitcoin security and how people can secure their own computers and can secure their own Bitcoins. We've had a couple of recent heists in the wild west of Bitcoin lately. One was Bitcoin Savings and Trust, which was basically a classic Ponzi scheme where the person who ran the Bitcoin Savings and Trust basically promised that in exchange for holding on to your Bitcoins, he will give you back a certain amount of Bitcoins each month at an incredibly high interest rate. I think it was upwards of 20% interest rate. And then so obviously as people heard about the people getting 20% returns on their Bitcoin, then all of a sudden you had more and more Bitcoins going onto this centralized server of Bitcoin Savings and Trust. People were entrusting somebody else, bringing it off of their own computer into this one guy's server, who wherever in the world he is, nobody really knows. But obviously more people started piling in. He was able to continue to pay out that interest rate for a certain amount of time, and then all of a sudden, one person said, I'm going to take my money back, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted their money, and then he obviously had nothing, and so it closed, and nobody can do anything about that because their Bitcoins are gone. There's not really any legal framework at the moment to get it back. So I don't know. What do you want to say about that?
You can prosecute this guy if you find him, but at the same time, it's that stupid. I mean, come on. How long has Ponzi scams been around? How long? I mean, Madoff was giving 13%, right? 13%. So I'm like, and people saw that was a Ponzi scheme. Like, could you not see 20%.
Well, I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin have this false sense that the Bitcoin price can only go up and up and up, which is not true. It fluctuates up and down like any other commodity. I remember last 2 years ago or a year and a half ago when Bitcoin made its way up to $32. People were saying it's just going to go higher. It's just going to go higher. Like I would, like the entire sentiment of everybody was that it's not going to ever go back to where it was. And I think some people have that kind of false sense of this particular commodity. And I think that maybe that's where some of the faith-based lending schemes kind of took hold.
Yeah, I guess because even I got caught up in that. I mean, I was like, because I've never seen anything like it before, right? Like, I've never seen a chart like this before. Never seen a gap. Like you know what? I tried trading Bitcoins when I first got into it, and it always gap away from me, right? It'd gap up away from me, and I'm like, what the hell? It's got to come back down, and it wouldn't come back down.
Right.
And so I'd be chasing it, and I'm like, oh, screw it. This must be some new paradigm.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I would show off charts to people of bubbles where people would say at the top, new paradigm. Oh man. And I'm like, oh my god, I fell for it. Because people inside a bubble.
Oh, it's easy to do. It's easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, in hindsight, obviously, I wish I had sold all my Bitcoins when they were $32, but obviously, hindsight is 2020.
I bought at 32. I didn't buy much, but
Right.
I did buy at 32.
I think I bought most of mine at $1.60, and then I was buying all the way up. I don't think I lost any money,
Yeah,
but I certainly didn't make any money like I had planned on doing.
Yeah, I figured out my average was $7.50 buy-in total.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was pretty bad. So it went all the way down to $2, right? So
Yep.
and then I was like, oh, I should load up, but I didn't have enough cash at the time because it was all moving into silver, and it's like, frig, man, I wish I'd had because now it's like $10, right? But,
So do you want to do a little bit of speculation? I think probably the floor is going to be around $6 or $7. I think it's going to go down a little bit from here and hang out there for a while. I think it's a pretty healthy, steadily growing economy at the moment. I don't know. You want to throw in, make any predictions about that? It's dangerous territory.
right now, I'm hoping for a pullback. It's at $11.35 last time I checked, and I have a buy order for $9.50. So I'm hoping for a pullback. I'm hoping that it goes back to like somewhere around $7.50, so it has some major support there. But you know what? If some news organization gets a hold of this, I'm going to have to chasing it because that's all it takes, right? Because the market's very, very, very tiny. And there isn't many Bitcoins out there. There's a lot more silver, a lot more gold, a lot more anything else out there, including dollars.
Yeah.
Dollars is practically unlimited because people can go into debt to create some more. So,
yeah, and nobody knows how many there are. I mean, let alone physical dollars. I mean, most of them are electronic. How can you really keep track of that?
So yeah, you can a lot compile in really quickly into the Bitcoin network and make it gap up again, and you won't be able to catch it. But
go ahead.
Well, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wanted to ask you if you've heard about the website BitInstant and their plans to make a debit card, partner up with a credit card company and make kind of a pay-as-you-go Bitcoin card. So basically, you could reload a card with a certain amount of bitcoins, and you could go to any merchant
Exactly.
that accepts a credit card or debit card, and you could swipe it. It would automatically convert your bitcoins into dollars, and then you can spend your dollars at the store. What do you have you heard about that? What do you think about that?
Yes, I heard about that, but I'm like thinking, okay, that will take away the point of Bitcoin because you're going to have to save your Bitcoins on a central server
That's true.
in order for it to work, right? Because I'm thinking how else it would work. You can't do it any other way. You've got to entrust your Bitcoins to them. So you're going to be sending your Bitcoins to a particular address, which they have the private key to.
Right, but I mean, obviously you can
sort of like
control the amount.
Some of the purpose.
You can control the amount on there.
That's true,
So,
that's true. You know,
I mean, I probably wouldn't load it up
Yeah.
with hundreds and thousands of dollars. I would probably keep maybe 50 or $100 on it at the most if I was going out with a Bitcoin loaded debit card in my pocket.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually that works because Bitcoin transactions only take an hour to confirm. So
Right, and then they could be reloaded basically instantly.
and then yeah,
And if you
exactly.
have if you have a client on your Android phone, I know Android has a client that you can have bitcoins, and basically it's a decentralized client on your phone. And I know that if you can do that, you could, if your card was getting low and you weren't at home, you could potentially send bitcoins from the client on your phone onto your debit card, and then make a transaction that way. So I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, yeah, in some ways I can understand that it kind of defeats the purpose, partnering with credit card companies, but I do think it would be a really good thing in terms of convenience and exposure, and maybe it'll be, one step to get people kind of shaken from their paradigm of the paper money system.
yeah, I think you're right. It's a good step. It's just that I don't think it's gonna get more people involved. It's just when people do get involved, it becomes an answer to a common question. Well, how do I spend it?
Say that again.
Once people, what it will be useful for is once people do get involved, it will be a good answer to the question: where do I spend Bitcoin?
Right.
You can use it with Get Instant and
Right.
your debit card.
Right. Yeah, because that's one of the things everybody asks. Well, I can't spend it anywhere. Well, you can spend it a lot of places online at the moment. You can advertise whenever I sell an item on Craigslist locally. I always put in Bitcoin into the ad. So if somebody searches for Bitcoin, they can come up with all the things that are for sale with Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, if we had a card like that, and if the fees on it were reasonable, then I think that it's a really good argument for buying a few Bitcoins.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no, there have to be other reasons for people to buy Bitcoins other than the card. There have to be something that they want to buy. But where it becomes very useful as a selling tool is, let's just say somebody you say, okay, somebody wants to collect donations, like they're collecting donations or selling some sort of software online. You can say, hey, why don't you sell it in Bitcoins or collect the donations in Bitcoins. And when they ask, well, what do I spend this Bitcoins? Well, get the Bit Instant credit card. And that's how we can use it. Then the people wanting to get into Bitcoins for, savings or spending, they will come because, hey, you know what? I could buy something with it directly with my Bitcoins.
Right. Right.
So really we want to get the merchants, right, with this credit card thing. And then we get everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And people can do that on a local activist level. I was watching a few months ago. Adam Kokesh was in Colorado using mountain hours. Have you heard of these?
No.
Yeah, it's a paper money system, and basically what it is that it's a free market money that is implemented locally. Like the mountain hours, I think, are based out of Breckenridge, Colorado, and then the guy who started it has set up the transparency measures or whatever, to kind of make sure that he's not going to print as many as possible. I think he has some safeguards against that, but he's convinced several local businesses to accept these mountain hours, as they call them, and basically it's more or less a certificate that he incentivizes people to use, and they're trading within the community, and kind of a lot of people are avoiding dollars altogether that way. It's pretty interesting. But I think you do like a YouTube search for mountain hours or something like that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I find those things interesting myself. It's just, again, they're centralized,
right,
and they can be easily knocked off, just like the Liberty Dollar.
Right, that's true. But I think any Bitcoin people out there who are enthusiastic about it, if you know a business owner or something like that, talk to them about it, and talk to them about the advantages, and also talk about the risks and the potential security issues with it, so they don't get burned in some way. But I think that if you go to a restaurant regularly and you know the owner, talk to them about accepting Bitcoins. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, every time somebody starts accepting Bitcoins, like the Gold Seek Radio started accepting Bitcoins, I immediately donate. Anyone who starts to accept Bitcoins that I listen to or go to and stuff like that, they get a free donation from me.
Right.
So I love that. And then I also, whenever I download a software product that nags me to give them a donation, I say, listen, you're a software company. If you want my donation, it's going to be good. I'm going to send it in Bitcoins only.
There you go.
Credit card information. You're not going to be calling me. I'm going to be sending you Bitcoins because you don't know who I am.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do. Like, if you're, absolutely.
Yeah, because then you keep your anonymity. Because like if you donate to some of these places, right, what happens is they start calling you and say, hey, I got this new product, or can you help us out over and over and over and over again?
Right.
So with Bitcoins, you can just send the money. I sent some money to what's it called, the WikiLeaks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's WikiLeaks.
Yeah, and WikiLeaks, it's interesting. I think Bitcoin is the only way that people can donate internationally to WikiLeaks, because the credit card companies have basically cut them all off under government pressure. But they do still accept Bitcoin donations, which nobody can turn off because of its decentralized nature. It's the fact that there's no central database, there's no central authority or law that can come in and turn the off switch.
Yeah, and you know what? We have to have this because places like PayPal, which shuts down bookstores because they're not happy with what the content that they're providing. That's ridiculous. I mean, it was this one. I heard of this one bookstore that was selling some like semi-porn books. That just it wasn't like terrible stuff. It was just stuff that I wouldn't buy. But again, it was
romantic novels. Yeah,
it was on the borderline, right? So, PayPal didn't like it and cut them off. So they had to get rid of those books. I mean, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And that's what Bitcoin fights against, is that censorship of the government and corporations, because PayPal has every right to do that because it's their business. I don't say that PayPal should accept everybody if they don't want to. That's them. That's their own business. But because of that, we need this kind of system where there's a freedom to transact with one another across the internet. Right? We need this way to transact with one another, because I object to a lot of things that are on the internet. But I can't be the central authority of what is appropriate and righteous on the internet, and what you should buy, what anyone should buy, because I believe in freedom, and I don't know what's right. I don't know everything, right? I don't know what's right for everybody, so I can't dictate things for everybody else. And I think with Bitcoins and a way for common people to interact with each other, I think that's fair, and I don't I I'm I just don't like our banking system and PayPal to decide what's right and what should be uh, what people should trade with, right? What items they should trade their money for. So I don't know. I I like Bitcoins because it provides us with the freedom.
Right. And even if there is some kind of centralized website or bank or something like that, such as PayPal,
Yes.
that you trusted, then you still can't trust the government laws that can use the point of a gun to dictate what a site can or can't do, or pressure them in various ways by saying, you can't operate in our country, you can't, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
And then Namecoin is going to solve the problem of losing your domain name because if it takes off.
tell me, just like, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. Tell me a little bit about Namecoin, because I've heard it, but I don't really know what it is.
Namecoin is just a decentralized DNS. You know how our DNS servers,
Yeah,
domain name servers, that's what they are. They
like GoDaddy that just got hacked by Anonymous yesterday.
exactly. They're all the DNS. Get a computer, www.microsoft.com. It goes and looks into calls the DNS and says, what is www.dns.microsoft.com? And it says, well, it's this number, which is a long number. It's called an IP address, and that's the computer you need to go to. And that's the computer you go to. You go to the IP address. Your web browser goes to the IP address, not to the www.microsoft.com, and gets the information and comes back. So that's how your computer knows where to go, which computer to go to. If those DNSs go down, it won't know to go anywhere. It won't know where to go to find Microsoft.com. And with Namecoin, it's a decentralized DNS. So the DNS is everywhere across the internet. Anyone who has the Namecoin client across the internet, and it would go because you have a copy of the database as well too. So if you downloaded the Namecoin client, you have a copy of the DNS, but your application wouldn't look at that copy, but it could. And what someone could do is program into what somebody has already done is program into web browsers to look in the Namecoin network for the IP address.
That's very interesting.
Because it's a decentralized database, nobody has it, there's nothing to hack. There's no place to hack. The DNS is never going down, and no government take away your domain name.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the future of all things internet and maybe all things other is decentralization, and that's one thing I really like about Bitcoin, is that it's completely decentralized. So there's no central authority that can either decide on its own or have the government decide for them what they are and are not going to do. And I kind of see the whole cloud thing. I don't know if that's really gonna take off. But they are definitely incentivizing you to get away from storing things locally and going into cloud-based servers. But I do think that as the technology gets a little bit more easier to be decentralized, I think that we're going to see decentralized currencies and decentralized banks and decentralized social networks and things like that.
If there's the decentralized cloud services, I'd use that, but do not use our current services, cloud services, because if you read the fine print, they can say, "Hey, I don't like what you have," and cut you off, and you can't get your data back.
And they basically own it, right? Or they pretend like they own everything that's on their server. You know what I mean? Like, if I were to put this video on my Gmail, Dropbox or whatever, then they own it. Basically that's the fine print, is that we can do whatever you want. You can make decisions, based on the content of this and whatever else.
Exactly. So I wouldn't suggest anybody using that. I looked into it, and for a little while I was thinking about it because I have a lot of data, and I'd like to have some sort of backup. But after reading that fine print that they own it, and then they can decide arbitrarily, like, because I wanted to store, like, for example, my Bitcoin private key,
Hmm.
compressed and encrypted on their servers, but then they could say, well, you know what? We're gonna cut you down off and delete that private key, and then I lose all my Bitcoins, right?
Yep.
So can't do that.
Yeah, I don't think any centralized network is infallible. Let's put it that way.
True, true, true. And that's why the decentralized nature of Bitcoins is awesome. Now, one of the things that people complain, people call Bitcoins a scam. People call Bitcoins is that it's fiat money. It's not backed by anything, and that's true. What I don't like is when somebody lies about Bitcoin, saying that it can never be money. But that's partly true because it's a currency, right? And the reason why I call it a currency is because it's not infallible. Like for example, a currency like a paper note, you could burn it and it's gone, right? Your bitcoins, right? You could take your bitcoins into your private key, take that private key, hit delete key.
Hopefully not. Or accidentally, which people have done. Or your computer fritzes out or gets lost in a fire or something like that.
Exactly, and it's gone, right? So, the way I see currency is something that's easily destroyed. Yeah, you could destroy gold and silver, but it would be a lot more work in order to destroy gold and silver. So currencies are easy to destroy, but that property helps it easily transfer the wealth across. Freak out when people call Bitcoins a scam, or that it's a Ponzi scam, right? And they don't describe how it's a scam. I'm like, okay, if you believe it's a scam, describe it. Describe how the scam works. Nobody ever describes it. They just scream scam.
Right. And I just want to point out that when people say Bitcoin is fiat, fiat doesn't mean that it's not backed by paper. I just want to point out to people, fiat just means that there's a centralized authority behind it dictating its value. So the United States dollar is a fiat currency. Even if it was backed by gold and silver, if there was an authority behind that, publicly setting the value of that dollar, even if it's backed by gold and silver, that would be fiat. But fiat just means that there's a centralized authority, and Bitcoin is not fiat. I feel like, in the sense that there's no centralized authority dictating its value. It's basically the free market deciding the value of one Bitcoin.
It's by decree, actually. That's where fiat comes from. To let it be done. It only refers to government currencies because they force you to use the money against your will. So that's where fiat comes from. Well, Bitcoin is not fiat because you don't have to use it, right?
Right. Exactly.
Right. So, anyways, Bitcoin's. If you really want to hate against it, I don't mind people hating, because you're free to do that. But at least do it for a real reason, right? That's what I say. Do it for a real reason. The real reason is that it's new technology, still in beta stages. It might fail. There might be some huge flaw in the system that nobody sees, right? Or there might be a better system coming out in the future, or quantum computers might take out the encryption. If you want to say all those things, be my guest and say that's why you don't like Bitcoins. Be my guest. They're all true, and you can say that till you're blue in the face, and I'll agree with you. But don't call it a scam, please.
Well, Da Vinci, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll patch this together a little bit because I know we had some Skype issues. But anyway, I just want to say thank you very much, and I enjoyed our conversation very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate
right.
talking to you.
We'll do it again sometime. Thank you so much.
Well, good night.
Good night.